Greetings and salutations, everybody. My name is Sean. I will be making this video for you today, and the reason I'm in such a good mood is because the gods have truly blessed us on this one. And by gods, I mean one of my mods and one of my patrons has sent me this beautiful segment from Vox that we are going to be breaking down today because it's very powerful and it goes over the important issue of tackling the important issue of discussing the important issue of racism. And before we even get into this video, because I will be zeroing in on absolutely everything about this video, we need to talk about the things that are odd about this video on the internet.com as it clearly states right now. And of course, I'm talking about that this video has disabled likes to dislikes, it has 1.9 million views allegedly, and it has around 300 comments. So obviously, something's going on here. Obviously, that's a little bit suspicious for my mind. But that's not the only thing that's interesting about this, because while this is uploaded on Vox, and it is a Vox production, it's also classified as a YouTube original. So our corporate overlords have paid for this segment. So I, for free, shall respond to what the corporate overlords and Vox, responsible for the Vox Adpocalypse, have put together on the conversation about having the conversation about starting to think about talking about racism. Episode 1, How Racist Am Me.
Honestly, we could have totally done this show with 5 non-white hosts. I think there's a fine line between taking up space in a conversation where someone else's experience is maybe more important than mine, versus wanting to model this behavior for other white people.
So you know this video is going to be a good one when it immediately starts off with an apology from the host for being white. Of course, this is something that you have to do. It's part of the humiliation process for the sin of white privilege, and this woman steps up to the plate and explains, using a black person almost as a prop, oh my god, this is racist, why the cast is allegedly diverse, but we're going to go over it later in this video on how the cast from Vox is not diverse at all. Also, notice the A+ production value on this. YouTube, the corporate overlords, the ones who make sure I get paid, don't take this the wrong way, but throw a little bit of money that way, and I could do a lot better content with that level of production value. But first class, all the way. It looks nice. You got to see some of that bokeh or bokeh in the background of some of these shots. Shallow depth of field, very impressive.
Over the past few years, more and more research has shown how racial bias impacts our world. From how teachers discipline students, to how engineers create new technologies, to how doctors diagnose patients.
So I just want to put out that she's laying the premise for this video. The reason they're trying to understand racial bias is because racial bias so clearly impacts our world in very interesting and compelling ways. So of course, she gives 3 examples where racial bias is not the thing that presents the unequal outcomes in any of those examples. First and foremost, she talked about disciplining kids in school.
From how teachers discipline students.
I hate to break it to you, but black kids misbehave more in K-12 education. This is why they get more suspensions. In fact, there is a strong correlation for not just black kids, but all students of not having a father in the household and misbehaving in school. This is disproportionately true for black students. Therefore, we see that reflected in their behavior in the classroom. Therefore, we see them suspended more.
To how engineers create new technologies.
This is just ridiculous, and it completely denies the practical realities of building facial recognition software. One of the reasons why it is more difficult to map black faces in facial recognition software is because light affects what the camera can see. If you've ever worked in independent film, I mean, for these people who are all talking about how you have to be conscious of race whenever you're doing something, you can't just ignore it in all circumstances. But whenever you're working in film, you have to have a lighting crew that understands how to light a darker complexion. Otherwise, they're basically going to disappear. Also, bad lighting conditions for black people have led to circumstances with bad makeup conditions as well, where they appear green on screen. Obviously, if you're building facial recognition software, you can't really control the light the same way that you would do during a set. The fact that Vox would call this an example of bias, even though it benefits black people to not have their faces tracked as easily as white people, is absolutely ridiculous. These are just the practical realities of building this technology.
To how doctors diagnose patients.
And in the medical field. Now, they don't really say because they don't source anything, they just assert, but I'm left to infer that what they mean by this is the way that black women are allegedly treated in a racist manner when they're delivering babies, because black women have higher rates of mortality and infant mortality when they go to the hospital to deliver a baby. However, this is also not due to any kind of bias. Black women are less likely to show up to prenatal care, so problems that can be detected earlier in the pregnancy end up being presented at the time of delivery. They're also less likely to take prenatal vitamins, so again, they're not ensuring the steps required in order to make sure they have a healthy baby before arriving to the hospital, and you're condemning the hospitals for having to deal with them circumstances. Also, black women are more likely to be obese. All of these are comorbidities with having trouble during delivery and during pregnancy. So already, the three basic premises laid out by Vox are 100% false, they're obvious myths, and they've been disproven multiple different times. So great job. I'm sure we're off to a wonderful segment. Let's get into the biases test.
I'm on my way to the Vox office to talk to the director of research for one of the most famous and controversial tests for implicit bias.
Hello.
Hi.
So I'm going to be 100% honest. Yeah, the production quality is good in this, but this is the perfect example of what we call overproducing something. Did we need her leaving the apartment, saying goodbye to her dog, just so you know she's a good person because everybody likes dogs, only to walk to Vox headquarters just to open a laptop to talk to the guy that supposedly she was heading to Vox headquarters to talk to over Skype? Like, this is just wasting YouTube's money. YouTube, can I have some of that money? And I promise I won't waste it like this. I'll actually make something good if you finance my operation. But come on, this is totally unnecessary. I get it's a pandemic. I get we have to meet virtually. But why are you going to bring a camera person out and go through all this just to have this virtual thing? Also, they have a cameraman on the other side of this. So they have the ability to have two people in the same room together. They just chose not to give you the illusion that it's about pandemic safety, but then they have people congregating together. Aren't these people all vaccinated? The vaccine works. Come on.
What I want you to do is just choose one that interests you.
I'm gonna try Arab Muslim IAT.
I'm gonna go with the skin tone one.
White Americans, Black Americans.
Asian American, European American IAT.
And I see some images of like this much of people's faces, basically.
So this is the cast of characters that Vox decided to subject to the implicit bias test, and this is a perfect example of what I like to call faux diversity. There's no diversity here at all. All of these people believe the same exact things, they all know the same exact terms, they all vomit up the same exact embarrassing talking points, they just have superficial diversity features. So they're all going to take the test, and I think we know how all of these tests more or less are going to go out.
Your responses suggested a strong automatic preference for black people over white people.
So we're not even surprised about this guy's results. It's not remarkable, but the next result is absolutely amazing, which is why I'm interjecting here, so you can hear it from the host from Vox herself.
A moderate automatic association for American with Asian American and foreign with European American.
This is a perfect example of why this segment is completely useless in measuring anything. It also undercuts the test, and they have the creator of the test, and he subjected his test to being undercut in this way. So you have the white woman who's the host of this. The reason I'm leading with the race is because they chose the races of these characters specifically so you could focus on this, talking about how she views Asians as domestic and native, but she views Europeans as foreign. This is self-flagellation. By the way, if you view Europeans, and you're in the United States of America, or people of European descent as foreign, and you view, by contrast, Asians as not foreign, you're inaccurate. You are wrong. The majority of this population is white, so European descent is what you would normally see. This would be the correct answer. Now, if you hear an accent or something that indicates they are literally from Europe, that's something different. Now, I live in an Asian neighborhood, so I understand completely that Asians are fully American and they're all around me, and I don't view them when I see them as necessarily foreigners. And I understand the idea that Asian Americans are Americans too. But the Asian population in the United States of America is one of the smallest demographics in the United States of America. So it stands to reason, especially if you're in a touristy area, which I'm sure they're in New York or LA, that associating them sometimes with being foreign would be more accurate than European descent people that you would run into. Do you understand what I'm saying? I'm not saying it's not necessarily bad to not associate Asians with foreigners, but I'm saying it makes more sense than associating people of European descent with foreigners if you're in the United States of America. Now, if you were in Asia, the opposite would be true. If you were in China, Korea, any of these nations, you would understand that. I mean, Japan, everybody else gets associated with foreigners. Like, you understand how this works. Like, it's just nonsense.
A moderate automatic preference for Arab Muslims over other people.
Unsurprisingly, in the test that she chose to take, because they didn't randomly assign them a test, which, by the way, probably would have put more accurate results because it's shown time and time again that if you kind of have a sense of the bias test coming, you're able to beat it. This woman prefers Muslims. The white guy's up next.
Little or no automatic association between weapons and harmless objects with white Americans and black Americans.
Unsurprisingly, the white guy's race neutral. I'm sure he'll apologize for that later. And now let's go to the black woman.
A strong automatic preference for light-skinned over dark-skinned people.
So, of course, she's going to be upset by the fact that she has a preference for light skin. Again, I'm not sure how accurate these bias tests are, but this is something that is common among black communities. And I'm sure as somebody who works at Vox, who is a progressive activist, it sucks to have this presented to you right in front of you. Also, remember what I said about facial recognition earlier, about how cameras are not as sophisticated as the human eye, which is why in certain Hollywood productions, you would light a black person differently in order to better see their face. Look at the light reflecting off of this woman's head. Did you see a light reflecting off anybody else's head? Obviously, Vox understands this conceptually, or at least the people behind the camera understand this at Vox conceptually, but somehow the host lost the grasp on this. Nobody explained it to her as they were lighting these elegant shots with shallow depth of field and all this cinematography going on. They missed that, yet you can see evidence of what I was referencing in this video.
I feel like if I were a police officer and I took this and I got this result, I'd be like, I'm not a racist cop, you know, I have zero implicit associations.
Now, unsurprisingly, the white guy apologizes, and then he's like, this is probably what cops used to say, that they're not racist. They have no implicit association. So basically, he's saying that the test that shows that he has no preference for, which, by the way, he took in such a way to make sure it showed that he had no preference for either black people or white people, actually could be used to cover up for racist cops. This is what a good white would do, according to Vox, because this is who were presented as the example throughout this video, him and the host.
Is having racial preferences in dating racist? Yes.
Yeah.
I would say no to this. I think people are allowed to like who they like.
I think that's problematic.
Racial dating preferences are not racist in any way, shape, or form, and the only person who got this right was this guy. Everybody else who's like apologizing and weaseling around the fact that they have their preferences makes no sense at all. Again, you wouldn't tell somebody that was not straight that their preference for the same gender made them some kind of a bigot against the other genders. Like, nobody tells gay men that they're sexist against women because they don't want to date them. We all understand that a part of attraction happens in the back of the brain, the not controlled part of the brain. So yeah, nonsensical in every way or shape or form. Only 1 out of 4 people asked this got this right. Shameful.
When I first heard that this is what we were tackling, I think a lot of us questioned whether we were the right storytellers for this.
Also, and I need to make this 100% clear, I can't stand the way that these people talk. And when I say these people, I mean progressive activists. Everything is all jargony and doublespeak. It's just nonsensical. It makes me want to vomit. The idea that they're tackling this or dismantling that, or they're delving deep and uncovering and dismantling and separating. It's all this jargon. It's just, oh my God, stop talking like this. Nobody likes you when you talk like this, and you don't sound smarter. You sound like you're trying to dodge. It's really weaselly and gross, and the idea that you're gonna add in like all these adverbs into what you're saying, and it's gonna mean that you're doing something instead of just talking nonsense, it's just not the case. It's time to stop.
Can you describe a time you felt embarrassed by something you did or said that seemed racist?
Just a few weeks ago, I was shopping at a vintage store in Brooklyn, and he was like, oh, I don't work here, but I get that a lot. And he was black, and I was like...
Okay, so just for argument's sake, what was your friend wearing? Because if he's one of these hipsters, which he hangs out with you, so that would infer to me that he is, because people tend to click up together, and he was asked in a hipster store if he worked here, or asked a question like he worked here, that might not have anything to do with his race, and it might have everything to do with how he was dressed. He might be somebody who's really into dressing well. When I go to that store, and I forget which one it is at the mall, where everybody who works there is like good looking and they're wearing the clothes in the mall, sometimes I don't see a name tag, but I look at somebody, I realize that they're the kind of person that gets hired at the store, like in shape, tall, maybe they're standing in front of the store being a model or whatever, like that type, and I ask them a question like they work there, and I make the assumption, like I make that logical leap that they may be that person, and every single time, I've been proven right. Now, sometimes, when I'm in Target, I stop somebody who's wearing a red shirt and ask them a question like they work there, and then they turn out to not work there. Like, they turn around, there's no name tag, they're just wearing a regular red shirt. And then I yell at them because, why are you wearing a red shirt at Target if you didn't want this to happen to you? You're a bad person.
Being pulled over by the cops with a black friend in the car, and I was not really worried about that interaction. And I think that, to my friend, that must have demonstrated a lot of white privilege.
So she was pulled over by a cop as an attractive woman, and she wasn't worried about the interaction, and she thinks that the thing that distinguished her from the black guy in the passenger seat who was her friend was the fact that she had white privilege, therefore she wasn't worried about this. I mean, just look at how nice this woman dresses. If she drives a car, do you think she drives a not nice car or a very nice car? Do you think that male police officers are kinder to her or an equivalently attractive non-white woman than they are to any dude? I mean, obviously you wouldn't worry about it, and cops would be less worried about you because women commit less crimes, and women who are dressed well and driving nice cars that they own commit even less crime. So get out of here with that. That's not white privilege. If anything, it's really weird that you would assume thoughts and implant them in your black friend's head in this story. It's actually uncomfortable, and I think you should re-examine that.
I definitely told an Asian kid at lunch that, you know, their lunch from home smelled funny.
Again, this is the stand-in that Vox and YouTube came together and decided was going to be the person to represent white males. I am not happy with my representation in this media, let me be clear, and I'm going to lean heavily on the fact that I'm half Hispanic so I can be completely disassociated with this person. Because the idea that he remembers a time that he told an Asian kid that their lunch didn't smell good at school means that either he's crazy and he's making this story up and he was trying to think of something, or he did it so often that he was a bully and maybe wasn't actually a problem. Now, if it was this one time, like his story would imply, maybe their lunch smelled weird. Smells are subjective. There are things that I eat as a Hispanic that would smell weird to you people out there that are non-Hispanic. A lot of it I think smells good, but some of it would smell a little off. It might be an odor that you're not quite familiar with. As an Irish person, there are things that I would eat with my Irish family that might not be very appealing, and the smell might not be very good around my more Hispanically oriented family and around my Hispanic friends or my Asian friends. This is not a thing, and it could have smelled bad. Also, Asians have way more variety in their cuisine. One of the reasons why their cuisine is actually really good is because they experiment and they have a bunch of different things that you haven't even heard of cooked up in there. And yeah, sometimes that produces a weird smell, but sometimes a weird smell does not mean a weird taste. So yeah, no, stop crying, stop self-flagellating. It's embarrassing. I'm embarrassed for you. It needs to stop. No more.
When you turn on TV or you play a video game or you watch a movie, The bad guys are always bald and typically always black.
So the next thing they go over is pop culture and media influence on people's view of race. And while you might think, like I thought when I first heard this guy say most of the villains in movies are bald black guys, that's not the case, because most villains have a British accent, and even if they're like in an animated movie, they have the British accent no matter where they're from, because we read certain British accents as villainous. What you do have to take into account, and I'm actually going to go with the lived experience argument, is that black people in black neighborhoods actually have different movies than the general public in their theaters. Some. And this is because black people typically care more about race than any other group in this country. So they'll actually watch movies more and more that have more black people or are directed by or starring black people, etc. This is why Tyler Perry has a very successful movie career, and I haven't seen a lot of Tyler Perry movies or movies made by the black filmmakers that go into these black theaters in black neighborhoods. So it might be true that the villain in those movies are typically bald and or bald and black, as he says. But aside from that, stereotypes are actually quite prevalent in movies. It's not as bad in television, although they do exist, because you have more time in television to flesh out supporting characters. But in movies, you often focus on your main character, your supporting character, and an antagonist, and everybody else kind of is one note because they're very utilitarian in order to serve a purpose, because again, they can't really be that developed as people if you're trying to tell a story in a 2-hour format. So there is some truth to that, and a lot of stereotypes were very racialized back in the day, and then they became cliches, and thus they were repeated. So I actually understand this argument from the regressive left more than other arguments that they put forward, because it has some basis in reality, and I'm not really a big fan of cliches in cinema, so I would actually like to see different things. That's not to say that the stereotypes are based on nothing. We know for a fact that stereotypes typically have like a general root in truth, although the point and why stereotypes are negative is because they're broadly applied to all people, and obviously you can't ever say all when you're talking about a group of people. That's just not how that works. So I'm skipping over that, but I'm actually giving them a little bit of sprinkles of good work and charity in there.
Answering a question like, how racist am I, is complicated. Not just because of the introspection required, but also because our definition of racism continues to evolve.
Now, they also get into redefining racism. Honestly, we already know that the left is actively trying to redefine racism, and this just goes on those lines. They want to change it from what we all understand to be racism to the systemic structures of systematic, structural structures of racism. We all get that. Again, skipping over it, you can watch the full video, link in the description. I want to get to the part where they have everybody sit down and have a supposedly honest conversation about race, even though it's a cringe fest.
Conflict between the personal and the structural comes in because you have a progressive person saying, I want to diversify my neighborhood. They move into a neighborhood that's been more mixed, and maybe they are then putting upward pressure on the rents there. And so you have to think about my role in that system as well.
So there's a lot of embarrassing moments in here, but I can't show you all of them just because we would be here all day. The video would be an hour long, and most of you would tune out. But I wanted to zero in on this part because it shows you the self-defeating nature of the progressive argument and how contradictory it is. So this person is obviously in favor of integration. She wants a more diverse community. But another word for integration is gentrification. So if you move into an area that's historically one demographic of people, and that demographic of people is a minority group, you will be called a gentrifier. And by the way, this girl is a gentrifier. She was talking about going to a thrift store in Brooklyn. Obviously, she's a hipster. She works at Vox. We all understand who this person is. But she feels bad about it, and she's like, we have to talk about participating in that system of people moving wherever they want to move and integrating, because that could play a role, because there's always people who sometimes will have to move out, and for some reason we're under the impression that we can integrate a society, but also nobody should ever have to move anywhere, and also nobody should move into areas that would make them more integrated. Again, contradictory nonsense. They're not saying anything. They're just saying structural, systemic, and a bunch of other jargon that's meaningless.
He's facilitating an honest conversation, something that you can do too with the people in your life.
You have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. If we do nothing, then we live in a society that remains segregated. What I'm here to say is, if we're going to have this conversation, and if we're going to model this conversation, then that conversation has to happen all over the country, everywhere.
So this is what I absolutely love. Regressive activists never actually talk about race. They never talk about it in any meaningful way. All they talk about is starting conversations about conversations that need to happen, because we need to have a conversation about having a conversation about having a conversation about race at some point. But near in the future, we should have 27 more conversations before that. And he's all excited about it, but it's like, bro, you're not saying anything. Nobody here is saying anything. At some point, they talked about ideological diversity. There is zero present here. Again, all of these people are on the same page. They're all producing this well overproduced segment together because they have the same goals, they have the same views, and they just want to talk about having a conversation because part of this is self-flagellation.
First, given what you've heard and what you've done and what you've said today, what are you going to do differently? What are you going to continue doing? And what are you going to stop doing?
What is the point of the exercise, Tony, to look in the mirror? What is the point? Why did you say to look in the mirror?
The purpose of the mirror is, at the end of the day, we've done all this work, is for her to be reflecting. It's the kind of metaphor of her reflecting on all of this.
Look, I don't mean to pull rank on you as somebody who's like worked in independent films, but you don't explain the metaphor. If you're gonna have people look in the mirror, you just shoot them looking in the mirror, and people will understand that in the back of their brain without you having to actually literally express it. Once you actually say what the purpose of the mirror is, it becomes comical because you are talking to somebody, they're shooting it in such a way to give us the illusion that you guys are looking at each other, but in reality, they're all looking at themselves in the mirror. If there was anything that expressed more that this was about self-flagellation more than anything, and like the exercise of having a conversation about having a conversation, like it's all staged, it would be you explaining that and then you going through all the trouble to show us how fake this looks behind the scenes. Ridiculous.
I'm really not gonna do too much differently. I think the work that I do, specifically the work that I've kind of fallen into, I value and I'm really excited to do it. If I was going to say I'd do anything, it would be being more proactive about not just being Ed Bradley, but being Mike Wallace at the same time.
So I like this guy saying he's not going to do anything. I don't know why I like it. It just amuses me. I'm not sure. Maybe it's because we have a culture that's always like, you need to focus on you and being you. It's all like self-esteem and all that. But honestly, that's me reading way more into it, other than the fact that I just cracked a smile when he said, I'm not really going to change anything, honestly. Like, I got a strong preference for one demographic of people for my biases. It doesn't matter. And everybody else, just listen to how they respond.
I'm going to stop feeling like I'm not qualified to talk about race.
I think I've for a long time had this feeling that the best thing that I could do was to shut up and listen, but getting more and more understanding every day that is not enough.
So everybody else is obviously uncomfortable, but we still have one more person, and let's hear from her.
I think I'm gonna stop being so guarded with my knowledge and just be more willing to share it and put it out there, because I think it's important. I think it's important for me to share and put myself out there.
The lesson that she learned from this is that she needs to stop guarding the vast knowledge that she has within and reach out to the plebs and teach them what she knows. So what she learned is that she knows everything and she shouldn't just hold back her knowledge because it's so vast. I mean, this is a level of arrogance that, like, I express on this channel because this is my YouTube channel. You guys literally come here to watch me. But part of me expressing it is, like, in a comedic way. She's saying it, like, serious and somberly. But, yeah, sure.
I think that what we did here today was just the beginning, so I'm going to do my best to continue doing what we started.
Just the beginning of what? What are you talking about? I know I've repeated myself a lot throughout the course of this video, and if it's too much, let me know in the comments. But she's saying this is just the beginning. We know that we have to continue what we started here today, which is just the beginning. Like, they're not saying anything. Does this not bother anybody else except for me? Am I like the crazy one here? Am I losing my mind? Am I the incorrect one? What's going on? Why does she keep saying, like, we're gonna start this thing soon, or, oh, it's just the beginning, we're gonna start this conversation, it's the beginning, and we gotta continue this beginning of the conversation that we started about having the conversation. It's nothing, it's empty, it's 22 minutes, YouTube gave them money for this, why?
I think that I got so caught up in concerns about my role or my place as a white woman in this conversation and whether or not I would be taking up space or unwanted, that I forgot about the importance of just doing the work myself and doing the best that I can.
Doing what work? Doing the best of what? What are you even saying? Who even are you? Why are you representing yourself as a gender and race class in this? You're the host of Vox. You staged this whole segment just so you can wrap it up in the end. What even am this? Let me make this 100% clear for those of you who are in the back and you might have trouble hearing. Every single sigh is fake. 100% of them all the time, unless you're on live stream. The reason why they're fake is even if they are authentic, they're authentic sighs, they're being filmed in a highly produced and highly edited video, meaning that they made the decision that she was going to look like she was turning on the camera. By the way, the camera's pretty high quality for what's supposed to be a webcam. I don't know about that. And then she sighed, like, like that's something that you plan out. That's something that you execute. They decided to leave that in. They could have started the shot with her just talking. They didn't have to have her sigh audibly, but they decided to have that happen. And that just goes to show you how nonsense, how fake, how overproduced, and how staged this is. There is nothing authentic happening here at all. 100% nonsense from start to finish, and it is all exemplified. It is distilled. It has been extracted and concentrated. And now if you mix it with water, you will have a whole bucket of inauthenticity in just that one side. No, stop sighing, stop doing it. I'm not fooled by it. Nobody should be fooled by it. Anyway, that's all I really have for you guys today. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. If you liked the video, you can show me by leaving a like. Obviously, you subscribe for more content. You follow me on all my social medias. They are linked in the description. You support me via the support links also in the description box. Get a t-shirt from my merch shelf. I marked down all the prices. This has been me talking about Vox and YouTube teaming up to make maximum cringe. Till next time.